Good afternoon, everyone. I think we're going to get started. Thank you very much for joining us this afternoon for the launch of the European Regenerative Agriculture Community, which the Agri-Capture CO2 project, funded by Horizon 2020 Europe, will try to set up and to animate over the coming years. So my name is Celia Nissens. I work for the European Environmental Bureau, and I am the leader of the work package 2 for engagement of the Agri-Capture CO2 project. And the Agri-Capture CO2 project is aiming to make it easier and more profitable for farmers to adopt regenerative farming practices. We want to do that through two main innovations. Let's say, on one hand, we are developing digital solutions which will help farmers monitor the practices that they're putting in place and the impacts that they're having on their soil. And on the other hand, we are wanting to create a community of practice, a space for exchange and learning around regenerative agriculture. And today we will hear about those two aspects of the project. We have a very interesting agenda. We will first start by taking a bit of a step back and considering why should we even bother trying to promote regenerative agriculture. For this, we will have three very interesting presentations from lead thinkers and scientists in this field, and lead doers as well, and some discussion. After that, we will hear from Dragutin of GI Lab, which is the organization coordinating the Agri-Capture CO2 project, about those digital solutions that we're creating. And then the third session that we will have is about discussing the power of collaboration, of partnerships, of learning and exchanging experiences and knowledge. We really hope to make this event as interactive as possible. So please do post comments and questions in the chat or in the Q&A as you prefer. We will be monitoring both. And also, just to make sure that everyone is aware, we are recording this event. We will be sharing the link to the recording as well as the presentations after the event. And now to give you a bit more of a feel for what the Agri-Capture CO2 project is about, I'm going to hand over, so to speak, to one of our case study farmers, Duncan Farrington, who has prepared a very nice video where he shares his views and his take on the Agri-Capture CO2 project. So that's going to be a short video I'm sharing now.
Hello, I'm Duncan Farrington and welcome to our family farm in Northamptonshire, England, where we grow wheat, rapeseed, barley and beans. All our crops are grown to leaf mark standards following integrated farm management principles, which means that the biodiversity around the edges of our fields is as important as the crops we grow within our fields. We also produce Farrington's mellow yellow rapeseed oil on our farm, and in 2020 we became certified as carbon neutral by the United Nations. I believe in a whole farming approach in our farming methods. We haven't ploughed since 1998, instead progressing more to a zero tillage approach on our clay soils. We now only cultivate around 1/5 of our land each year. This is a great spot to see regenerative farming in practice. On the edge of the field we have established a wildflower margin next to the hedge and watercourse, increasing biodiversity, including habitat and food for pollinator and predator insects, which pollinate our crops and feed on pests, reducing the reliance on insecticides. The winter wheat is just emerging, being established through zero-till planting following last year's rapeseed crop. This field has not been cultivated since 2017, when biosolids were last applied. We use a broad crop rotation, including winter and spring cropping, combined with using cover crops before spring crops and companion crops in our rapeseed. I always look at ways of doing things better and reducing costs of production. Moving towards less intensive cultivations has reduced machinery costs and time needed to establish crops. Fuel use has reduced by around 65%. Broadening the crop rotation reduced fertiliser around 13%. We use such figures in our carbon neutral calculations. However, on this field, I have shown that our practices have increased the soil organic matter by over 75% in the last 18 years, as well as improving overall soil health and nutrition. Soil carbon content is not currently internationally recognised for certified carbon neutrality calculations, which is a stumbling block in encouraging farmers to improve their soil health. Additionally, practices on how best to improve soils is not widely understood for both reducing greenhouse gas emissions or creating resilient farming systems to grow healthy, nutritious foods. I joined the AgriCapture CO2 project as a case study, which aims to find an internationally acceptable measure of soil carbon content and to take farmers and land managers on a regenerative journey to improve the soil health and the wider biodiversity around their farms and green spaces. The ultimate aim is to create financial and environmental returns for best practice. I've made a start, but there is so much more we can do. My next aim is to reduce nitrogen synthetic fertiliser by at least 50% through crop rotation, better soil health, use of nitrate inhibitors or biostimulants, for example. Following that, I'm sure we can do so much more to reduce the weight and the cost and the power of the machinery we use. Remember, we're only trying to establish seeds in the ground about that deep, and I'm sure we can do it far more efficiently and effectively.
Thank you everyone for your attention. So this is a story of Duncan and of AgriCapture CO2. I'm now going to hand over to my colleague Alistair Leake from the Game and Wildlife Conservation Trust, who is going to guide us through the first session of today's event and introduce our next speaker. So Alistair, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Celia, and thank you, Duncan, for that fantastic introduction to this afternoon's session. I'm Alistair Leake. I'm part of the AgriCapture consortium, and I look after a research and demonstration farm in the central part of England, actually not very far away from Duncan. But my role this afternoon is to introduce you to the speakers who are going to take us through the next half an hour or so before we open the floor to questions. I've got three principal speakers, and then we're joined by another member of the AgriCapture consortium of Brogden. So our first speaker this afternoon is Professor Jane Rixon. She'll be followed by Dr. Emilio Gonzalez Sanchez, and we'll finish up with Caroline Drummond. So Professor Jane Rixon has over 30 years of experience in research and consultancy and teaching in soil water management engineering, especially specializing in soil degradation processes and sustainable land use management. Her work has focused on better understanding of soil functions and their role in the delivery of ecosystem services, including water regulation, agricultural production, and carbon storage. She uses a multidisciplinary approach to integrate fundamental and applied land use resource science at a range of spatial and temporal scales. And her work is directed at research councils, industry, farmers, and policymakers. And I know from first-hand experience that Jane's engagement with farmers is particularly excellent. So Jane, I hand over to you to take us through the first part of this afternoon's session. Thank you.
Thank you, Alistair. Thank you very much for that introduction, and good afternoon, everybody. I'm delighted to be here, and thank you very much for the invitation for talking about what I love best, which is soil and healthy soils. So I've been asked specifically to talk about the vital importance of soil and specifically soil organic matter for regenerative agriculture. I am a soil scientist by background, so again, very biased towards soils, and hopefully you'll enjoy the presentation that I will try and make in the time that I have allocated. I'm sure I will overrun, but I'll try desperately. So I'm from Cranfield University. I'm a professor there in soil erosion and conservation, and I'd just like to share some thoughts with the audience about the vital importance of soil. And I like to illustrate this by, if you think about what you've had for your lunch today, or even breakfast if you're skipping lunch, then 95% of our food comes from soil. So it's a really good way of engaging with not just our community, but actually beyond that as well, in terms of society as a whole, as to how important soil is. So could I have the next slide, please? Lovely, thank you very much. So I would argue, as a soil scientist, as we've just seen from the video, how fundamental soil is to regenerative agriculture. I've been around in this game for so long that I remember we called it conservation agriculture, but it's almost as if conservation agriculture is not enough. We can't just conserve what we've got, because decades, centuries have been degrading our soils. So just conserving soil is not enough. We need to go to the next step, which is regenerative agriculture. Not only conserve what we've got, but actually replace what we might have taken away by unsustainable soil management practices in the past. So I would argue that soil organic matter is at the heart of soil health. And I've got this fabulous diagram that I've shamelessly stolen from my colleague, Professor Carl Ritz, which, you know, so many people say, well, what do you mean by soil health? How do we measure soil health? There are thousands of soil health indicators out there. And I think this diagram is really, really helpful in presenting what I'd call the minimum data set. If you had to just have 5 key soil metrics that indicate soil health and how fundamental this is to regenerative agriculture, these are the 5 that I choose. Soil carbon, or organic matter, which is what I'm focusing on, and what Duncan mentioned a lot in the video. But also it's really important how that then affects things like our water and our airspace, our porosity, the amount of air that can be held within the soil, where all the microbes can function and add to that biological community. Air and water space is so important as well, because it allows our soils to receive rainfall, to retain rainfall, and to release rainfall. That distribution of well-structured soils is really, really important, so that we hold on to the water during times of drought, but we can release that water at times of flooding, so that we don't get waterlogged conditions, which we know are associated with big compaction problems, and how that can lead to all sorts of management problems on the field. So again, you'll see soil organic matter not only affects the structure of the soils, as I've tried to say, in terms of the porosity and that air space, the water space, but also we know that soil organic matter is really, really important until the soil biology. You know, we talk about healthy soils. What is the life of that soil? We're much more attuned to the fact that it's the biology working within that soil, which helps things like nutrient cycling. And that's why biology is related to nutrients, which in turn are related to soil carbon and so on. So I think this diagram beautifully shows what soil health is and how important it is that we have all of those 5 components, particularly soil carbon. Because as you can see from those red arrows, if we lost one of those characteristics of a healthy soil, say the soil organic matter content, look how that impacts on all of those other indicators of soil health, a sort of domino effect. If you lose one of those circles, then the whole structure, the whole house of cards falls apart. And I would argue that carbon, soil carbon, is at the heart of all of that. You lose that, you'd lose all of those other metrics. And we know how important healthy soils are because they deliver a range of goods and services to society, not just farmers and researchers like myself that keep us in a job, but also the whole of society. I mentioned about food production. Think about what we all had for our breakfast or lunch. It will be from terrestrial environments, from the soil. And yes, there's always people that have had salmon or prawns or something like that, which negates my hypothesis, but the vast majority of our food does come from soils, which is why it's so vital we look after it. I've mentioned water regulation, ability to cope with drought and flooding that are going to become more common. Climate change mitigation, how important it is to maintain the carbon in the soils and sequester more carbon from the atmosphere and store it within our soils, which have huge potential to store carbon. And then, of course, all of that means that we've got a great habitat. Again, Duncan mentioned about these biodiversity areas, the hedge rows, the woodland trees that are creating habitats for our biodiversity, but those rely on healthy soils as well. So again, I've shamelessly stolen this diagram, which illustrates the 5 core principles of regenerative agriculture. And I would argue all 5 are related to healthy soils, whether it's minimizing soil disturbance, maximizing crop diversity. You have to have a fertile soil to get those crops, keeping the soil covered, maintaining your living roots throughout the year, and obviously integrating livestock, which can add more organic matter and so on. So can we have a next slide, please? So given that I've sort of done the PR, if you like, as to how important soil carbon is within this house of cards that is soil health, which then delivers sustainable agriculture and regenerative agriculture, I think one of the take-home messages in terms of the farmers that will be working for, the land managers will be working, first of all, avoid carbon losses, keep the carbon we already have. Try to avoid exposing buried carbon, during inversion tillage. You'll see one of those photographs shows how we're exposing that buried carbon that we've already got in the soil. By exposing it to the atmosphere, we're then going to cause carbon emissions from these agricultural soils. So can we just reduce the intensity of that tillage a bit? Do we have to invert it? Could we use direct non-inversion methods that don't expose that beautiful buried carbon to the atmosphere? Let's keep what we've got. Let's try and avoid soil erosion. Again, we know that soil erosion is going to expose buried carbon. And you'll see that photograph with a PhD student of ours standing in a gully. And you can imagine all of that lovely carbon that's been stored at depth throughout that soil profile will be exposed to the atmosphere, and we will lose that carbon through CO2 losses. And then a big problem, particularly in parts of the UK, are these draining some of our wetlands, some of these precious peatlands. And again, by draining that land, you're exposing that carbon, that buried carbon, to the atmospheric oxygen, and that is causing, again, CO2 losses. So my first take-home message would be, let's try and manage our soils and manage our agricultural operations so that we're not actually losing any carbon that we've already got. So this is the concept of conserving carbon. But I think we can go a next step further to actually try and build up carbon. Thank you. Oh, that was seamless. Absolutely seamless. That's very good teamwork without even saying next slide. Well done. Thank you. Secondly, and this is my last slide, just to show that there are many things that we can do with farmers to increase soil carbon, both the sequestration, taking the carbon out of the atmosphere that we have heard so much about at COP26, but also then bringing that carbon, storing that carbon in our soils. Things like cover crops, companion crops, extending rotations, bringing on livestock onto the land to add more organic matter. Not be afraid of bringing back some of the mixed farming operations that we've lost through intensification of agriculture. Even going so far as to changing land use, bringing in pasture and forestry and agroforestry. There's a lot of work looking at how that is helping to sequester and store carbon. Maybe on a smaller scale, just small buffer strips, headland strips, hedgerows, farmland trees. All of these small steps can make a big difference in the long term. I've mentioned reduced tillage systems to try and keep that carbon in the soil. And again, try and reduce soil erosion where we're seeing carbon being moved off in sediment and runoff. So I could go, as you can tell, I could go on all day, but I haven't got all day. So apologies for that. And I see Alistair's come back to say, okay, right, wrap it up now, Joe, so which I will. But last slide, please. Just as my take-home message is just remember these 5 key elements of healthy soils, which really are at the heart of this regenerative and sustainable agriculture. Thank you very much.
Lovely, Jane. Thank you. Thank you very much for that. And I was going to ask you, you know, if there was a one single thing that you could ask a farmer to do, actually, you've really answered that already, because there isn't one thing that any farmer can do. As you beautifully put it, we've got to integrate all these technologies. And I am just picking one question up in the chat for you, because I know you've got to go shortly, so I wouldn't wish you to escape this particular one. But what role do you feel biochar could play amongst all these techniques?
There's a lot of research being done on biochar at the moment, actually, and I think the most important thing is we still, of course, I would say this as a scientist, but we do really need to know how effective biochar. There are so many different things that come under the umbrella of biochar. You know, it depends on the feedstock, it depends on the hydrolysis process, it depends on all sorts of ways in which you've developed the biochar. But in general, I would say it is a promising technology. We need more evidence. We need mechanisms by which, by putting the biochar in the soil, and that in itself, what application rate, how do you incorporate it? We need more understanding of the mechanisms by which, if I put this product in, be it biostimulants, biochar, whatever, how is that affecting those 5 indicators of soil health? The biology. Is it enhancing the biology in the long term, not just having a flush of carbon, but actually having a more stable carbon in the long term? So I'm afraid I don't have a definitive answer. I think, yes, we need more evidence, and it is promising. I've carried out some research with biochar myself. It is promising, but one size will not fit all. It is not a panacea, and there will be circumstances where it's great and others where it is neutral and may actually be damaging in places. But this is where we need the evidence.
Yeah, no, that's excellent. Jane, thank you very much. You're not entirely off the hook, because I know you're with us for a little bit longer yet. So if anybody else has got a question for Jane, put it into the chat, and I'm sure she'll attempt to answer it before she leaves. So that moves me on very nicely to our second speaker this afternoon. Professor Gonzalez from Cordoba in Spain is an agronomical engineer and associate professor at the University of Cordoba. For 20 years, he's been working with the Spanish Conservation Agriculture Association in the Living Soils project. And since 2005, he's been the General Secretary of the European Conservation Agricultural Federation based in Brussels. And I'm delighted to say I was part of the founder membership of that organization back in 1999. Emilio has participated in numerous European projects aimed at the promotion of conservation agriculture and its impact on climate change, soil conservation, and water protection. So there is nobody better this afternoon to give us 8 minutes on conservation agriculture. Emilio, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Alistair, and congratulations for the initiative. I'm going to very briefly present the deliverables of conservation agriculture in a framework of regenerative agriculture, as you mentioned now. The origin and the need for regenerative agriculture and conservation agriculture is because conventional tillage farming is not delivering. We have a lot of problems related to soils, and we see maps that are brilliantly released by researchers, by the European Commission, but we have a lot of pictures that are coming from our fields. Those are from Spain, most of them, and we see that, and we know that the origin of that degradation is intensive tillage. As Professor Rixon and as Duncan has mentioned in the video, well, this should be avoided, because what we see is this tillage of soil, but what we don't see is the burning of soil organic carbon that is happening, in fact. And we see erosion. Maybe we don't see the sediments going out of our fields, but we see the result in our rivers. This is the Guadalquivir River in my hometown. And if you go to the river mouth and you get a nice flight and you get a satellite image, you see that the river is carrying sediments that are released into the sea. But this is also happening in the UK. You see this brown color is the soil of England, live in England, and there are a lot of research alerting that we need to change. And the change is conservation, regenerative agriculture. And we can put on different names, but we should think of principles. The first principle of conservation agriculture is minimum soil disturbance. That means please don't touch the soil, don't tillage the soil, avoid intensive tillage, use zero tillage, no tillage instead. Leave the soil permanently protected with a cover, and rotate crops. Don't grow monocultures, because we know that they end up in pest and disease problems. And this is delivering a lot of positive benefits into the soil, water, air, and also the society itself. We need to adapt the system, and this is not a fairy tale. This is not a panacea. We need to adapt the system. We have conservation agriculture in permafrost in Canada, in arid regions in Australia, and we have in many countries in Europe. And we need to adapt the system to the rotation. We need to adapt the machinery. We need to be wise to provide solutions both for annual but also permanent crops. These green strips in between the tree rows are very good for protecting the soil and enhance the soil health and quality. As Alistair, you have mentioned, you have your logo here, SMI, the English and the British founder of ICAF. It was there. We were also in Spain, in Italy, Portugal, France, Germany, and Denmark. And we founded ICAF in '99 because we needed a network that would be able to give answers to the demands of farmers. So we have grown since '99. We started, as you see here, 7 members. Now we are 19 members, covering most of the agroclimatic areas in Europe. And we have a lot of individual members, most of them are farmers, but we also work with cooperatives, with the private and also public sector, because to make this figure even better in the future, we need to collaborate, public, private enterprises, and also, of course, taking the needs of farmers on front of that. We have developed different projects. Our best partner has been the LIFE financial instrument from the European Commission, where we have been with whom we've been working for the promoting conservation agriculture throughout Europe. We have also several projects running also with the Game and Wildlife Conservation Trust in the UK, with Syngenta as well, with NIAP. And the point is trying to bring all the needs that regenerative and conservation agriculture needs to increase the adoption in Europe. We are also collaborating in H2020 projects based on especially on the climate change side, but also on the agroecosystem crop efficiency, especially thinking of the predictions of climate change according to the IPCC is that we will have less rainfall, and we need to adapt the crops, and we need to adapt the soil management system to these new situations. And we need to work also with policymakers. That's why ICAF is engaged at international level. We've organized 2 world congresses in Europe. The first one was 20 years ago, and the last one has been last summer, where we had the pleasure to welcome FAO DG, where we had the picture on why FAO is supporting conservation agriculture worldwide, because it's delivering both for the environment and also for the farmers. We need to be aligned with the Sustainable Development Goals, with the European Green Deal, with the international initiatives, with the Paris Climate Change Agreement, with the 4 per thousand initiative, which is more linked to the increase of soil organic carbon, and conservation agriculture can deliver. These next 3 slides, last 3 ones I'm going to present, are part of my presentation at COP26 a few days ago, where we presented the deliverables of conservation agriculture in the Life Agromitiga project, where we have we are working in almost 40 farms in the south of Spain, and we have increased the efficiency in the use of carbon. We have reduced the workload for farmers, and we have maintained and even increased yields in some crops. Soil organic carbon in conservation agriculture is not a question of topsoil, just 5 centimeters. We should go deep down, and we are testing down to 30 centimeters. And as average, we have increased in the first couple of years in our fields 13% soil organic carbon. We develop a gross estimation about the what could be the importance of conservation agriculture in terms of soil organic carbon sequestration. And you see on the left-hand side the picture for annual crops, and on the right-hand side the picture for ground cover in permanent crops. The dark brown tell us the current sink of carbon, and the light brown the potential. So there is still a lot of what we can do to improve soil organic carbon in our soils through a better soil management. So thank you very much for your attention, and I will be very happy to answer your question now. Thanks, Alistair. I think I was in time, right?
You were. You surprised me. Thank you very much. Yeah, there's only a couple of questions to deal with just now before we move on to Caroline. Can you make some comments about the use of glyphosate? And secondly, there is a perception that by stopping ploughing and reducing the inputs, your yields are going to drop dramatically. Could you say a few words about that? It's got to worry a lot of farmers, I would have thought.
Of course. There is a transition period. I mean, there are a lot of problems that are coming from the plowing system that we need to overcome. It's not going to be an overnight issue, and we need to let's say, to improve our soils, the soil structure. We need to little by little, but fortunately with I would say in a period on this issue. Our experience tell us that in the long run, conservation agriculture perform much better than conventional farming. And I will link this to the second or to your first question. With a good soil cover, rotating crops, the weed pressure in conservation agriculture is less than in conventional tillage. We perform a survey among European farmers, and the use of glyphosate in conservation agriculture is less than in conventional tillage. And that's not surprising for me, because we know that through these principles of conservation agriculture, we are improving the whole ecosystem. And we know that glyphosate is an issue now in Europe. By the end of next year, the renewal should be addressed, and we believe that the science will be behind the decision of the European authorities. We know that EFSA and ECHA are not putting any extra concerns on glyphosate. But you know that, Alistair, science, even science should be always behind the decisions of policy makers and politicians. It's not always the case. We hope this time it will be.
Very good. Thank you very much. Okay, so that brings us very nicely onto our third section, and I asked Caroline Drummond of LEAF to cover this, because Caroline has been expert in reaching out from the farming community into the policy area, but most particularly to the general public. And if we are to form a true community of European regenerative agricultural practitioners, we need to get our message across to the public as well. while. Now, Caroline's been running Leaf for the last 30 years, since it started in 1991. She's especially interested in the development of sustainable food and farming, and has spent over 38 years of experience in this area. Graduating in agriculture, she has a broad practical agricultural experience from across the globe, and her work focuses on encouraging more sustainable farming practices and building better trust and understanding of farming, food, health, and the environment. And these are values which she personally is extremely passionate about. She's actively involved in many industry partners and lives on a farm and is married to a dairy farmer. So over to you, Caroline, and to talk about your experience. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Alistair, and congratulations to everybody, because it's great that we've got the European Regenerative Agriculture Community launch. And as Alistair, as you've highlighted, it matters. It matters to farmers, as just been really importantly highlighted about carbon sequestration, about healthier crops, about the whole capability of us growing. It matters in the marketplace, and it matters to consumers. So in terms of where this is going to be creating a platform for people interested into regen ag to share knowledge, that's going to be incredibly key. And I would, very taken by a lot of the discussions that we have with our demonstration farmers. We have a network of demonstration farmers. This has to be about connections, communities. And we constantly need to be researching, testing, adapting, experimenting, adopting, and then kind of reset in terms of getting continual improvement. Next slide, please. So for us as an organization, the framing of what we've done has been through integrated farm management. I think there are lots of descriptors for what is basically good, forward-looking, continually improving farming, whether it be conservation agriculture, whether it be regen ag, or indeed integrated farm management. But the real challenge here is that farmers are constantly, like circus acts, juggling some 9 balls. And many of these framing is going to be incredibly important to deliver against biodiversity targets, as well as obviously carbon and healthy food. Farming and water quality and air quality has been very well defined. Next slide, please. But we really need to accelerate this. And I think if we look at particularly at regen ag, it's the outcomes that are going to be so important. When we brought our farmers, a group of farmers were developing a beacons of excellence for regenerative agriculture. One of the farmers described it as it's like a game of snakes and ladders. You just think you've cracked it, and then actually something else, it becomes a bit more of a challenge. And I think this practical application of outcomes that deliver against improved soil health, improved organic matter status, and embrace what Emilio and Jane have just described in terms of what can be delivered in research can actually increasingly be delivered in the field, but with more resilience, more robustness, and more reassurance, because at the end of the day, farming is a hugely risky business. And I think this is, as Duncan highlighted, a fifth of his farms now only a fifth is cultivated. But I think the fact that he's constantly setting targets to challenge what he's doing and how he's doing it, that's going to be really important. Next slide, please. And that's where the really big discussions happen. It's that thinking, that farmer to farmer engagement, understanding things, whether it be on Zoom, whether it be in the field, or indeed whether it be through Twitter, and getting more discussion globally, European-wide, and obviously on our national countries. Next slide, please. But as Alistair said, actually, how do we connect this with consumers? So for the last some sort of 20 years, we have had Leaf Mark. So farmers are doing the right thing, and then they are getting recognised for that with independent external verification in the marketplace. So we see retailers like Marks and Spencer's and Waitrose have been constantly promoting integrated farm management, Leaf Mark, through their marketplace. And we've just seen Tesco now say that all their UK and global produce will be Leaf Mark certified. This is about accelerating change. And if, as a consumer, when I go into a supermarket, I can purchase more responsibly produced food, then actually, even if it's by stealth, I don't necessarily see the label, then that's something that's really important. And we're seeing that also happening through governments. The whole of Jersey is a Leaf Mark certified business. And then in addition to that, we've seen it through Quaker and Jordan's. Next slide. And this is what drives the metrics, the success. What does good look like? It's that bit of, I know the soil smells great, I know my crops are healthy, but it's also about some of these really strong metrics that are becoming very important. Next slide, please. And as Alistair said, connecting with consumers. We're really chuffed. We ran a competition recently and had some of our very young people, they were in the sort of the 14 to 16 bracket, coming from a large city, one of them in particular from Manchester, never been out on farm, never driven a tractor, never been engaged. He wants to be a soil scientist now. And I think this engagement, we forget that farming touches all senses. And the more we can communicate and get people engaged through all our senses, the more it builds trust, it builds understanding, it builds interest. It ensures that we've got the next generation of farmers, researchers, and people that are really geared up to be a part of farming. And so we've now, for the last 16 years, been running Open Farm Sunday. It's been online for 2 years now, and we did do a real one this year. But over 250,000 people go out onto farm. Families discovering the story behind their food. And they love soil. They love getting down and dirty like farmers. So this is something that's really important. And my last slide, please. And I think, you know, this whole area of engaging people at a young age is, sorry, the last slide, is all about engaging people and making impact. I think more than anything, you will hear from the farmers, you've heard from the researchers, you've heard from Duncan. But, you know, if I'm doing the right thing, then actually it's got to be really making some level of impact. And it's great that the schools, teachers that we work with, and indeed we do this thing called Farmer Time, which is becoming increasingly global, where schools and farmers pair up, because people love farming, people love food, and it's a culture that we need to really increase. As we draw together and build a community, we mustn't forget consumers. Thank you, Alistair.
Lovely. Thank you very much, Caroline. And your enthusiasm continues to shine through, even though you've been doing it for 30 years. Now, there isn't a question that I can see that's directly related to you in the chat. There's some general ones that I'll raise in the middle. So I'm going to throw one to you. Your success in the UK has been notable. How successful have other countries in Europe been in connecting people with regenerative agricultural practices in the way that you have over here?
So I think what was interesting, the idea, the concept of Open Farm Sunday came from Denmark, and it wasn't particularly, and I wouldn't like to sort of pretend that Open Farm Sunday really kind of creates and forges that link of regen ag, but it starts the journey. And, you know, we've all got to start somewhere. So that's been very successful. And actually with Farmer Time, what's this connection? So you literally, you know, you have your phone, the farmer is in the field, and he will be on the whiteboard in the school and developing the relationship with those young people. And start off with, it was like, oh, what time do you get up? What's your dog's name? Type questions. But now, you know, we've got a whole younger generation who are really engaged with the climate change challenges, and they want solutions. They don't want to be frightened by, oh, it's, you know, it's bad news. They want solutions. And I think that's what's great about the farming industry and the whole drive of regen, more integrated and agri-ecological approaches, is that we are actually coming up with some solutions. They won't all work, but we want to keep on building them forward.
Great stuff. Great stuff. Right, now I'm going to open up the questions to the panel. And we've obviously lost Jane, but we have got Brogden with us. Brogden is part of the AgriCapture project from Serbia. He has experience in crop production, soil tillage, fertilizer management, and a soil mapping consultant. And he, like myself, leads an experimental farm which supports extension services to disseminate sustainable agriculture. And most memory, he's responsible, I'm told by my crib sheet here, for several decades now for maintaining a 7-kilometer long flower strip on the experimental farm. So well done, Brogdon. I think you've beaten me there. I don't think I've got one that long or even perhaps that old. So well done. Welcome to the panel. Now I've got the chat. So perhaps, how do we get farmers? What is it that gets them started? I'm going to throw that to you, Emilio, first, because you're mentioned to this. But
Oops. Hi, Alistair. It seems I lost the connection for a moment. Can you repeat, please?
Yes. What is it that we need to do to get farmers to go on this journey, particularly if you're given the, that there is a risk, potential yield loss and so on? Farmers are very sensitive about that.
Absolutely. I think we need to speak their language, and that means bringing farmers next to farmers, and that's why farmer networks are so important. Establishing field days, demo farms, living labs, and helping them understand that the profit is not the income, is what the incomes and the costs. And we know that farmers are very smart, but some of them, they are just focused on reaching the highest potential in terms of yields. But if you have to spend way more to achieve similar yields, I mean, maybe we should explain better that what's the real profit behind that. And of course, we need to bring public support. There are millions around, and the European Union and also the UK government will establish, I guess, subsidies for farmers to help them perform better. So we need to invest in real sustainable agriculture, and we know that agriculture, unfortunately, is not performing well, because we see soil degradation across Europe, and we need to reverse that negative effect. And we need to fight climate change. Also, there are a lot of initiatives going on there, and we need to bring conservation and regenerative and sustainable agriculture in front of those subsidies.
Thank you very much. And Brogdon, your experience in Serbia of reaching out to farmers, could you make some comments about that?
We start always to work not only on our experimental field. We have 220 hectares in Farm Advisory Service of experimental field, and have always 50% in some conservation tillage practice, and another 50% is always on conventional, means plowing field, because some company with trials want to plow for his hybrids or varieties. But when we put trials on our experimental field with conservation tillage systems, different, we always work on the farm with the farmers and show them practically what's the benefits of conservation tillage. This is not possible to give him a result, best results in first years. But our experience is that we need about 5 years to system try to start to work, because first 3 years in conservation tillage systems in our conditions in Serbia on Chernozem soils, we have good results, and then yields stop to rise. And after 2 to 3 years, we have good and high yields again. This is a period of adoption. All the system. We don't have cover crops yet, but a lot of farmers, especially in our groups in project, start to use cover crops, and some produce seeds for that cover crops, because the market for cover crops seeds is not big. Always work on the farm with the farmers, and farmers have equipment. We have equipment, and it's totally free. No any cost to work with equipment, and we have some equipment like mulch tiller, and we have a strip till machine. Some farmers have no-till planters and drills, but they start to use some conventional practice or some conservation practice with that no-till planters and drills. Always work on the farms. It's difficult to change habits, and before we start to work, we always looked what is the type of soil, characteristics, physical characteristics of soil, and of course properties, and of course take samples for chemistry properties to see the content of nutrient, and we then suggest which type of changes of tillage he can do. And of course, if they don't have equipment, we'll give him and said, okay, this is totally free to start to do that.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Great. And Caroline, would you like to just put your pennyworth in on that one?
Just very quickly. I mean, I think the real thing about the driving change is there's a lot of brave farmers out there who are prepared to take risk. And actually, from our experience, when we get our leaf demonstration farmers and our members together, they are can-do farmers. They want solutions. They, you know, I used to say sort of 5 years ago, farmers experience weather. They are now experience climate change, and that is in your face. And from that point of view, coming up with fast solutions is something that's really key. So I think it's can-do ones that are enthusiastic, but actually sprinkle a little bit more enthusiasm to get more people to really drive that change.
Right, okay, now we've got 2 minutes left, so I'm going to give you one question, and I want you to the three of you to answer it if you can. It's a question that's come up in the chat, and it's basically asking this. Given the advantages of regenerative agriculture for biodiversity and the ecosystem generally, should government fund farmers to shift to regenerative approaches? And since you're not on mute, Caroline, you can go first.
Thank you. So without a doubt, there should be enabling legislation both across Europe and the UK, which is supporting the level of change that's needed. And I think some of the funding, yes, I mean, we need more infrastructure funding, and as well, you know, you say about the machinery and the kit is expensive, and it does require change, and it does require risk of cropping systems. So I think there does need to be enabling, and in that transition period, without a doubt, it needs supporting. And as we move forward, it's just kind of working out, because there is, with climate change, there's too much change going on in the background.
Yep. Okay. Bogdan, what do you think?
We don't have subsidies or support by government to change practice. Everybody knows that equipment is very expensive. Machines is expensive, but we only have subsidies for organic farming. But sometimes this kind of production doesn't mean changes in tillage practice. But for the farmers who wants to change, to go to conservation agriculture or regenerative agriculture, we don't have subsidies.
Okay, and Emilio, what's your thoughts?
Alistair, I'm sure you all have read the document by the European Parliament that was published last April. Inaction on soil conservation is costing 50 billion euro per year. That's all. I mean, we need to help farmers, and it's much cheaper invest in helping farmers rather than invest in reconstruction in infrastructure or in fact, I mean, doing something that it won't be easy to do. I mean, the soil we lose is something that we won't get back, at least in the next couple of centuries.
Yeah, and that's a very, very good point really to finish our discussion this afternoon in this first section. This soil is valuable and we cannot replace it, and therefore we really must focus our efforts on conserving it, which is where Jane actually started in her presentation an hour ago. So listen, thank you very much everybody, to our panelists who have done a fantastic job this afternoon, not just sticking to time but delivering some really punchy messages for us there, and thank you for all the questions that have come into the chat and the Q&A. I'm sorry we couldn't get to them in this session, but I'm sure we will answer them outside of that session too. So thank you all for your participation. I'm now going to pass over either going to Celia or to Dragutin, I think, who is going to talk about the digital solutions developed by AgriCapture CO2, which is another part of this Regen Ag project. So thank you.
Hello, everyone. So we are having really inspiring speakers today. And let's just start my presentation with a fact that we are really need to scale up the adoption of regenerative agriculture or conservation agriculture, because it obviously has great potential in addressing issues like climate change and other environmental issues. And it is hardly done without the use of appropriate technology. And this is what I will speak today about. What are we developing in the scope of AgriCapture project in terms of digital solutions? So I'll start with what is our goal. So to make it easier and more profitable for farmers to adopt regenerative agriculture. And this is what we think is a crucial thing to scale up the global adoption of these practices. And to put in the context, all farmers need strong motivation to do it. At the moment, we can see two types of incentives, let's say, for farmers. One in generating carbon credits and earn some extra money by doing regenerative practices, or the other way is to receive some kind of certification like LEAF label, so they can have some additional financial benefits by doing this. So the AgriCapture platform, or a set of services, actually we are developing 4 services. A quantification service will estimate soil organic carbon stock at field level and optimal soil sampling design. Exploration service will provide farmers, project developers, or any individual who want to know more about what the amount of soil organic carbon sequestration can be expected if in changing of the practices, and what is the impact on farm economics. Support service is actually extension of well-known and already used crop monitoring and farm management solutions that we have in the market. And finally, verification service will provide information that be used to check a farmer's compliance with certification rules. And to tell you something about each of the services we are developing, I will start with exploration service. The main question to be answered through this service is how much carbon can be stored if regenerative agriculture is applied. So any farmer could join this journey, would probably know to expect how much of that can be produced, how much soil organic carbon can he sequester in their soil. At the moment, the service runs on ROTC model, but it is questioned what is the right model to use, because ROTC model doesn't seem to provide robustness enough to involve the change of the practice in it. So it is questioned which models to use. Another part of the exploration service is related to economic benefits if regenerative agriculture is applied. In that terms, also farmer can explore what he can expect in terms of savings, costs, if he changes his behavior. The next service is quantification service. First of all, the service will provide a pan-European map of soil organic carbon stock. It already does for several reference years from 2001 to 2019. It is estimation of soil organic carbon stock in kilogram per hectares provided by each pixel in this map. It is of high resolution, so it's 30-meter resolution, and one of the finest that you can find, if not the finest one. And it was produced by machine learning models using Earth observation data, so satellite data, as predictors. Of course, for establishing baselines and for monitoring purposes of the soil organic carbon sequestration is not appropriate product. So farmers need to do moil soil sampling and soil analysis. But then this service provides optimal location for soil sampling based on uncertainty, so uncertainty guided sampling. So per each field, a farmer can just enter the number of points and he will receive the exact location when he should go. And in that way, the soil sampling is optimized. So instead of taking a lot of soil samples with only few within his field, he and we and whoever is involved in a scheme will receive a very high quality information on soil organic carbon stock at field level. And that's exactly the last product that and the ultimate product of this service. So how much of the soil organic carbon is present at field level? And the purpose of this is for a baseline, to establish a baseline, but also further monitoring of carbon sequestration, because the whole procedure can be done in every year or every 2 years or every 3 years, depending on what is dynamic of monitoring is required by the scheme. The next service is support service. Support service is based at the moment on two crop monitoring and farm management systems provided by Satagro company in Poland and Gilab company, which is offering a crop lab solution to their customers in Serbia. So the crop monitoring systems, these are not only ones, obviously, existing at the market. So the crop monitoring system actually provides farmers information on the state of the crops, on the weather condition, meteorological parameters, weather forecast, yield estimation. It provides also data data on management zones, so it can support variable rate application, and so on and so on. There are really many functionalities that differs from one solution to the other. But what we are going to do within the scope of AgriCapture to actually expand that these standard, let's say, functionalities with some new ones. For example, integration of data from soil moisture sensors. That is quite interesting for our Greek pilot. But then also precision agriculture for resource efficiency in olive production that would strongly relate on the previous one, because by resource efficiency, we actually mean water consumption. Satagro will expand their services with soil management module, and also the functionality that will provide information on low profitability field zones, and will propose the other solution. Instead of growing crops in low profitability field zone, it will provide suggestion for changes, for example, establishing some nature strips. Also, we will integrate alerts for local pathogen risk that we collect from different sources. And finally, of course, service guidelines for farmers will be provided. It is designed in a way that no matter where the farmer is subscribed for which service, it can be CropLab or Satagro on any other existing on the market. It will be possible to integrate these functionalities through a REST API exchange, so any farmer can use it if their provider is taking these functionalities developed by AgriCapture partners. And finally, verification service should simply answer the questions: are farmers' actions compliant to the rules of a supporting scheme? So as I said at the beginning, there are two types of supporting schemes for farmers who adopted regenerative conservation agriculture. One is generating of carbon credits, and the carbon credits generation follow a standard procedure. We are talking about voluntary standard or voluntary schemes, where, for example, verified carbon standards of WERA, gold standard, PlanView are the leading standards in that domain. So the standard procedure is you start with designing a project, when the project developer should prepare all the documentation and design a project. The project developer will use verification service to collect the necessary information that he needs to create the project design documentation. For example, to check applicability condition and to prove it, for additionality, providing proof on the additionality, but also for establishment of baseline and project scenario. In the next step, it will all be checked by an independent auditor through validation process, where an auditor can also use all these information and products that will be provided by Agri-Capture verification service. And finally, in the implementation phase of carbon credit generation process, in the verification phase, also project designer will use the information for report creation, and auditors will use the information for checking the validity and to verify that all the reports are true. And finally, the carbon credits are generated. So obviously, using high quality information from verification service will strongly facilitate that process, because it will provide transparent, reliable and high quality information. Some certification scheme, for example, LEAF is, let's say, a bit of more simple, where actions are could be remotely verified by the auditors in order to certificate. And at the moment, we are developing models to verify these practices that you see on the list: cover crops, crop rotations, mulching and crop residues, left on soil, tillage, type of tillage applied, so low or no tillage, intercropping, perennial crops, agroforestry, and also we are working on peatlands regeneration verification. And obviously we are strongly relying on Earth observation data, mainly from Copernicus Sentinel missions, but also we are using very high resolution imagery from Planet data. Planet is our project partner, and Planet is one of the leading commercial satellite data provider. And data to be generated that will be used for all these purposes that I mentioned before are crop type, planting, harvest date, bare soil occurrence, type of tillage, depth of tillage, reduced tillage identification, cover crop, residue crop, mulch cover, irrigation, grazing, flooding identification, biomass burning, but also land cover of special land cover types like grassland, wetlands, because you cannot establish carbon credit projects on a land that was wetland and turn into agriculture. It's not possible, for example. But also land cover data on surface and shallow water and forests and shrubs. And obviously, as I said, we strongly rely on Earth observation data. It's game changer in supporting agriculture, because it is providing time series of data. So every now and then we have an image. Planet, for example, Planet is generating a fusion product, which is daily product of 3-meter resolution. So it is really great product to be used in agriculture. And as a conclusion, I need to say that obviously technical solutions need to fit the user requirements, and this is what we started from. We asked different stakeholders what they need in the context of what is existing now. But it is also true for other way around. Technology can drive the development, for example, of new supporting schemes. And I think that today, establishing and launching of European regenerative agriculture community is a great opportunity for us to reach the wider audience in this development phase. And I'm really asking and calling all of you to join this journey and to join this process and help us to develop and produce the best possible solutions that can serve good and finally scale up the adoption of regenerative agriculture. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dragutin. That leads us really well and nicely to the next session. So unless I see any questions in the chat urgently for you, but there is, I see one in the Q&A, which maybe you can answer quickly. So according to both the International Standards Organization and WBCD CSD protocols, sorry, I don't know what that one is, validation is not an audit, but is an assurance of the project proposal only. Why is audit listed in this space? Or how do you define audit at this stage? If you can answer this now live, this is good. Otherwise, you can answer in writing afterwards.
Okay, I can answer in one sentence. So actually, validation is done by an independent auditor. So independent auditor needs to check all the project documentation to approve for and send it to the standard.
Okay, that was very quick. Thank you very much, Dragutin. I will hand over to Rebecca Davis from LEAF to take us through the last session, which really delves into the big question of how do we start this journey? How do we work together? And you know, what would this new European regenerative agriculture community be about? Becky, are you there?
I am. Hi.
Great. On to you then.
Thank you very much, Celia. And thank you to everybody else, those of you that have joined, and also the previous speakers. So, as Celia mentioned, I'm Becky Davis. I work at LEAF, Linking Environment and Farming with Caroline, and I also work with Celia within the AgriCatch CO2 project. So we've heard now about why regenerative agricultural practices are the solution and what our project is trying to achieve. But this last session is moving on to look at this community that we're launching today, so the European Regenerative Agriculture Community. I'm going to refer to it as the ERAC moving forward because it is a bit of a mouthful. So I'd just like to open the session with a brief outline of what we hope the ERAC to be. And again, just a reminder to please put your thoughts, comments in the chat, and if you do have any specific questions, if you can put them in the Q&A, which is just at the bottom to the left of the chat function. So the ERAC, it aims to be a space for farmers, researchers and other practitioners interested in learning about regenerative agriculture. And with kind of membership as such to this community, you will be able to access events throughout the year, things like online webinars, on-farm demonstrations, training events, both online and on the farm, and also workshops. And the themes and content of these sessions will mainly be led by the members of the community, but by yourselves. So what is it that you need? What is it that you would like? Which kind of links into what Dragutin was just saying then, you know, we want to be led by you. And it will also be partly led by what our case studies have to showcase and highlight. So as you saw at the start of the meeting, we had a video from Duncan Farrington at Bottom Farm, who's one of our case studies. We also have 5 others based in the UK, Serbia, Poland, Crete and Kenya. And they are the start of our network of the ERAC demonstration farms. So they'll be hosting events on farm throughout the year. And one of our aims is that by the end of the first year of the community, we will have onboarded some more demonstration farms by engaging with the community. So then in the year 2 of events, we can have more on-farm demonstration days and events and activities. That's just a very brief kind of outline of the offer of what the ERAC is. And what we'd quite like to do is to sort of gauge what you would find useful. Firstly, asking why you'd be interested in joining a network, specifically around knowledge sharing, and then what sort of events would interest you as part of that network. So it's a Slido poll. I'm going to share my screen. To those of you that have used Slido before, you'll know what to do. If not, you can just scan this QR code, or you can go onto this website here, slido.com, and type in this code, which is 412100. And that should take you to the first question, which will just get up and running. So first question, why would you want to join a knowledge sharing network? What is it that you want to gain? You know, how can we add value to your journey and your experience in implementing regenerative practices? And I'll just give that a few minutes to load. There's some really great things coming in. I suppose it's the skill sharing, it's gaining experience, learning from others' mistakes, what works well and what doesn't work. I'll keep the poll open so you can continue typing, but we'll move on to the next question, which is, in terms of events and activities, what would be most useful to you as members of a community, as members of a network? Would it be on-farm events? Would it be online webinars such as these where we have speakers? Would you want sort of breakout rooms where you could share experiences with one another? So case studies, we have, like I mentioned, we have 6 case studies within the project. So if you go onto our website, which if I can ask Celia for you to put a link in the chat, please, I can then link you to our case studies and what's being done with them. Brilliant. And like I mentioned, I'll keep the poll open, I won't stop it, but I will stop sharing and we'll continue with the rest of the session. Brilliant. That's really, really useful, thank you. So we can take that away and develop the activities plan for the network. So enough from me. Next, I'd like to introduce the panel speakers, and they are here to talk about what they see the benefits of joining a network are and why peer-to-peer knowledge exchange is so important. So we've heard a little bit about this in the earlier session from Caroline, Amelia and Alistair. But moving on, this is specifically about networks. I think for the sake of time, I'll introduce everybody all at once and then invite them to speak afterwards. And then please put your questions in the Q&A. So we have Joe Stanley. He's the head of training and partnerships at the Game and Wildlife Conservation Trust Allerton Project, also a Leaf Innovation Centre. And he is a very experienced mixed farmer. He writes widely in Farming Press, and is also author of Farm to Fork, The Challenge of Sustainable Farming in 21st Century Britain, which is his attempt to explain to the general reader the realities of modern agriculture. Joe is also involved in the project as a partner with GWCT alongside Alistair, who we heard earlier. We also have Andrew Ferguson here on the panel, and Andrew joined the senior management team on the highly diversified 3,000-acre Leckford estate at Waitrose Farm in 2011 as the farming manager. He's responsible for arable, beef, orchard and vineyard enterprises, as well as much of the non-crop land on the estate, such as woodland, water meadows, fenland and chalk grassland. Andrew and his team have recently embarked on a regenerative agriculture strategy for the farm, building upon the IFM practices already in place through their involvement with Leaf and Leaf Mart. We also have Ewan Caldwell, who is the James Hutton Institute's head of farm, field and glasshouses. He is an award-winning farm manager, previously recognised with an RSPB Nature of Scotland Award in 2016, as well as accolades from the Royal Agricultural Society of England 2017 and a Scottish Business Environment Vibes Award in 2018. Ewan manages the Institute's farms as commercial farms with a crop rotation including spring barley, winter wheat, winter barley, mining peas, winter oilseed rape, field beans and potatoes. These farms are an integral and important part of the Institute's science resources, vitally important for conducting experiments, but also they demonstrate science and carry out knowledge outreach. Ewan and his team have made a sustained contribution to farming innovation at the Institute through work on magic margins, the development of infrastructure for growing hops within Scotland, the protection of wildlife, the innovative use of GPS technology for plot grain drilling, and the design of a low-cost storage system for biomass, amongst others. Thank you, Ewan, for joining us today. And we were also supposed to have Adam Bauza, the chairman of the Terra Nostra Foundation based in Poland, with us. However, unfortunately, he's unwell. He has sent me a statement that I would like to share, and then I'll pass over to Joe, Andrew and Ewan for their sessions. So from Adam, he just would like to make the note that such a network of international cooperation provides many opportunities for more efficient operation and above all for the exchange of experiences. There is only one agriculture, it looks different in each country, it struggles with different problems. It's important to be aware of this and be able to properly communicate with farmers how they can affect the environment and climate. So if that's okay, Joe, I'll pass over to you and then we can go on to Andrew and Ewan.
So I will just share my screen, and I've got a very brief presentation here. I will try and share my screen. Here we go. Okay, can we see that? I hope we can see that.
Yeah.
Okay, so yes, my name is Joe Stanley, and I'm a farmer who works at the GWCT's Allerton project in Leicestershire, right in the heart of England. And I've been asked to speak about the value of networks briefly this morning. Now, the Allerton project is a 330-hectare research, demonstration and educational trust. So we are a mixed lowland livestock and arable. We're very representative of the average mixed lowland British farm, which means we're a great place to carry out research here. Now, we've been working since 1992 to pioneer modern, productive and profitable agriculture in partnership with a thriving natural environment. And you can see in the background there, that field is sort of an example of the sort of landscape that we create here. In the top left, that's actually a field of agroforestry, which was established a few years ago. Just to the right of that, at the top of the screen, is actually an area of scrub that we're sort of, if you like, rewilding as part of an agri-environment scheme to provide habitat. And in the middle, of course, we've got a field there of winter oats surrounded by various different wildlife margins, from pollinator to wild bird margins and wildflower mixes as well. So there's a huge amount going on in that picture, effectively stacking different habitats and different enterprises for a more sustainable farming landscape. Now, when we're talking about collaborations, so obviously Agriculture is looking to develop a European regenerative agriculture community. And now we find, as the Allerton project, as a farm research and demonstration institute ourselves, that we're part of multiple networks, which we find to be very valuable in our work. One of those is as a LEAF Innovation Centre. Now, the LEAF network, obviously, as we've already heard earlier from Caroline, it's all about sustainable farming, sustainability in farming. And not only do many producers in the UK produce food to the LEAF sustainable food mark, but there are also many demonstration farms and also innovation centres. Now, we ourselves are proud to be an innovation centre, a research establishment pioneering new approaches to push the boundaries of IPM. And as part of the Innovation Centre network, of course, we find it's great to be in touch with like-minded research institutions who are also pushing the boundaries of integrated farm management. We can pool our expertise, pool our resources. But of course, the demonstration farms themselves, working farms, it's great for them to be within that network as well, to really talk to each other about what works, what doesn't, and how they can push forward in the realm of sustainable agriculture. As you can see, there are a lot of these scattered across the UK, and it's a really great network which represents all parts of the country. We are also a part of the A-Team Foundation. This is a national network of agroforestry farms. Essentially, the A-Team aims to promote agroforestry as a means to grow food, to transition to elm, which is in the UK our replacement for the Common Agricultural Policy, and to contribute to public goods. Now, what the A-Team Foundation really looks to do is to showcase farms and initiatives across the UK to share knowledge and evidence the value of agroforestry, because unlike on the continent, unlike in Europe and in other parts of the world, agroforestry is actually relatively uncommon here in the UK in terms of newly established agroforestry projects, as you see in the photograph there, which is a picture from the Allerton project here at Loddington. Agroforestry is treated with a certain element of suspicion in the UK, so it's really great as we move towards a future in which it will no doubt play a bigger part in our agricultural landscape, to again be part of this, organisation, to be part of this network, which is helping to share best practice in the field of agroforestry. And we hope that the resources that we put together will become a go-to resource for people looking to start out on the agroforestry journey. In the UK, AHDB, the Agricultural and Horticultural Development Board, it's a statutory levy board funded by farmers and growers, such as us here at the Allerton project. But they do an awful lot to create networks across the UK to share farmer-to-farmer experiences, to create knowledge exchange. And it's generally accepted that within at least the agricultural industry, that farmer-to-farmer exchange and experience, interactions with their own experiences is by far the most effective means of which to share information within our industry. It's the most trusted form of information. So the AHDB is a national organisation which has a whole series of different initiatives to try and boost this farmer-to-farmer knowledge exchange. So the Strategic Farm Programme, which focuses on specific elements of technical performance within a single sector, perhaps. The Monitor Farm Network actually focuses on whole farm improvements. So that could be mixed farming, looking to improve business performance across the whole range of activities that they actually provide. Discussion groups are more detailed performance analysis alongside experts to really try and drill down into the detail. And Farm Bench is a great initiative put together by AHDB of thousands of different farms, which have all put in their financial and performance information into an online platform to allow farmers to take part in a much larger network in order to effectively benchmark themselves against each other and to try and work out how they can improve their performance. And again, AHDB will always stress this, the real importance of person-to-person knowledge exchange. And within the UK, the AHDB does great work in this sphere. Finally, slightly close to home with the GWCT, with the Allerton project, cluster groups. This was a concept pioneered by the Game and Wildlife Conservation Trust back in 2012. whole area, region of farmers all coming together to effectively create positive change within a landscape scale. So this has become increasingly common in the last decade. These are farmer-led groupings of farms. There's now more than 100 across the country. And these are really bottom-up organizations where farmers and land managers and landowners in a certain area look to set local priorities and to really then pour their own resources in many cases, sometimes also facilitated by some public money, to really help drive positive landscape change, whether it's around water quality, whether it's around biodiversity, habitat creation. They choose their own priorities, and then they work together, sharing experiences to enact change over a bigger scale. And this is an approach which has really been found to work incredibly well in the UK, and which the GWCT are proud to have been a part of. So these are some of the main areas in which, me as a farmer and also the Allerton project here at Loddington have found that collaborative working, being part of a larger network, can be really beneficial in achieving not only our business aims, but also our environmental aims as well. And with that, I will pass on to Andrew, I believe.
Many thanks, Joe. That's an excellent presentation and an excellent list of the various peer-to-peer knowledge exchange sort of forums that we have in UK agriculture. Just as a reminder of who I am, I'm a farm manager on a 3,000-acre farm in Hampshire. It's a Letford estate, which is owned by the John Lewis Partnership, a large retailer within the UK, and we're part of the grocery part of that business, Waitrose and Partners. So a big part of my role as a farm manager is in producing product for retail through the parent company, through Waitrose. But we're just embarking on a transition to a regenerative agriculture approach on our own farm here in Hampshire. That's in the back of nearly 20 years as a leaf integrated farm management demonstration farm. So a few small tweaks to our system and a few major tweaks to our system as we embark on a regenerative agricultural approach. By this point, you'll realise that I don't have a presentation to share on the screen. So what follows really sort of reflections on what I've seen and heard so far in the earlier presentations. I'd say excellent presentation there from Joe on the list of peer-to-peer knowledge exchange programs and opportunities that farmers have in the UK, and I'm pleased to say that I do take part in a number of those. If we were to go back 100 years or so in farming, the peer-to-peer knowledge exchange would probably be over the fence with the neighbouring farmer or the local livestock market, or at the annual agricultural show in the district or the county or the region. Fast forward to the 20th century, and we had the development of a number of the initiatives that Joe was listing earlier. But we're now faced with the climate challenge, and regenerative agriculture is really a global phenomenon. And it's important, therefore, that we engage in peer-to-peer knowledge exchange, not just at a local level, a regional level, a national level, but at a continental level or a global level, which is why this initiative is so important. Speaking as a farmer, and I'm a commercial farmer, I'm not managing a research farm. We are a demonstration farm, but we're demonstrating commercially viable, environmentally responsible farming techniques. But as a farmer making a change to his farming practices, I'm faced with a number of challenges. I work in a low margin business, so to try anything different brings with it a financial risk, which I've got to weigh up. Well, actually, what are the pros and the cons? I've got to kind of create a little bit of a business case for making a change. The cost of that change, the output from that change, and it's not always that easy to determine, one, what the costs are, and two, what the outputs are from any kind of change that is based on kind of adopting regenerative agricultural principles. So there's a financial challenge, there's a technical challenge in terms of actually how do you go about it? What do I need to know? How can I implement that? There is, of course, the old problem in farming in that we work on pretty much an annual cycle. So whatever change we make, it's a full year before we get the actual results or the full results. And it's obviously another year before we can make any additional changes. So the changes we make to the system and therefore the outcomes from those changes are incremental. And at a single farm level, that may not be, in the big picture, particularly substantial or progress that is fast enough to be substantial. Which is why, rather than rely on independent learning where we learn from our own experience, it's why peer-to-peer knowledge exchanges is so important. So we can have mutual learning, interdependent learning. Because when you approach anything that's new, you come up with a whole list of questions, more than you come up with answers. And who's going to answer those? Well, it's a heck of a lot easier to answer when there are many heads in the room or in the field to put that brain power and experience together. I think that's pretty much as much as I want to say. I'll quite happily take questions, but I shall hand over to Becky.
Thank you very much, Andrew. If we do questions afterwards, so if I can pass over to you and then we'll have a look at the Q&A afterwards.
Thanks, Becky. I also don't have a presentation to share today, but I thought I would talk a little bit about my experiences with networking. And I mean, I go back to the time in which I had a fantastic opportunity to become a farm manager at a relatively young age. And I remember many years ago feeling quite out of my comfort zone and getting involved with lots of various networking groups. And I think my message really is to others, it is the same for everybody. Everybody feels a bit of discomfort when they first start getting involved in networking groups. And I thought I could talk a little bit about the advantages that I've gained through being involved and taking my own self out of my comfort zone. And it very much was that. I have been involved in various groups, but the two that I want to speak about are a little group that we ended up setting up ourselves within our own water catchment group involving 10 farmers. And not all of them had spoken openly together prior to setting up that group. So it was a really fantastic opportunity for me to be involved with that group. In our own water catchment, we had a problem, a challenge of water runoff and erosion. And together, we actually managed to sort out a plan and work together to resolve that problem. And it involved working with lots of people and on everybody's land and understanding the problem and where it came from, and that it wasn't necessarily any one individual's problem. And we made a fantastic job of making that better. Now, one of the things about learning in networks is that there are so many variables to all of us in a farm operation, and that starts with geography, to soil types, to height above sea level, to cropping rotations, and even includes weather. There are so many variables and nothing ever stays the same, everything changes. So from being involved in networks, borrowing ideas, stealing ideas, adopting ideas, I have brought ideas back to our farm. And inevitably, along the way, we've made friendships and connections and have adopted, adapted, and worked with people that we trust and that we can openly engage with and share problems with. And I've gained huge advantages in developing these people and networks and connections. And it brings me to another project that we've been working on in our completely opposite end of the spectrum. Have been involved in developing a large project at our Glensock farm. We've called it HydroGlen, and we are trying to develop a rural community that includes more than just the farm network. It includes all of our neighbours and surrounding businesses, and we are trying to harness a renewable energy to make the farm and our local community self-sustainable. So we need to store that energy in the form of a battery or hydrogen fuel cell or hydrogen itself. So lots of challenging. We finished the feasibility study, and there were some problems that we ran into, and clear problems that I couldn't solve on my own. So through networks, including our friends at Leaf, we have managed to make connections at reasonably high levels to try and gain access to people's infrastructure, to technology that's not market ready yet. And we are blessed with opportunities to be able to contact and communicate with people that I wouldn't normally manage to make contact with. So there are things that I've added value to and taken support from in terms of networking. So my message to finish with is, if you are far too busy to be involved in a network, then you're probably the sort of person that should get involved with a network.
Thank you very much, Ewan. Thank you. There are a couple of questions coming in, but I was hoping to be a little bit cheeky and ask my own first. So Caroline touched upon the public engagement piece a little bit earlier, and it kind of comes into what you've just mentioned during this new project that you're looking at. And then I was also hoping to direct it to Joe with your kind of history of engagement through writing. How important is public engagement, so with consumers, neighbours, and not other farmers, for the future of farming, for the future of the industry?
Yeah, I could go first. I think if we are to tell our positive story about all the good things that we do, then we need a medium in which to tell our story. And I think regenerative agriculture is that. I think we need to be really careful that we don't, in doing that, suggest that we were only all doing bad practices up until the point we adopted regenerative agriculture, because lots of people, including ourselves, in terms of attention to detail, have been doing many great things until that term, regenerative agriculture, came along. But underneath that, there will be lots of variations of detail in what regenerative agriculture is. But I think it's a healthy thing to do, to have something to give it a title, and to which generally explains to the public and others, including policymakers, what we propose to do in terms of regenerative agriculture.
Yeah, no, I'd completely agree with that. I think the issue is that we know that we need to transition to a more sustainable food system, around the world. Of course, in the UK, speaking, for myself and within the EU at large, of course, we do a lot of very good things. However, we also know that to get policymakers and politicians to put legislative or financial support behind positive change, generally speaking, you need to create a public demand for that. You, generally speaking, are not going to get politicians agitating for expensive transitions in our food system without there being a public demand for that. So absolutely communicating with our consumers, with our customers, and letting them know where the problems lie within our food system and how we have the solutions to solve that. Now, whether that's our national or our international food system, it's the public that have really the power to demand change, whether it's from their retailers or ultimately from their government. So obviously it is farmers and those on the ground who are best placed to elucidate those arguments to the publics within their own countries.
Thank you, Joe. I didn't know if anybody else wanted to jump in on that, Andrew, or even members of the other panel. We'll move on.
Yeah, I just following up on that, Becky. Yeah, in the discussions and public discussions and media discussions on climate change and greenhouse gas emissions, obviously agriculture is often mentioned. And perhaps despite the fact that certainly in the UK, it's at 10 to 11% of greenhouse gas emissions are from agriculture, yet transport is nearly 3 times as much in terms of its contribution to greenhouse gas emissions. And obviously in farming, in agriculture, it's ruminant livestock that come in for the kind of greatest ire. But speaking personally as a mixed farm manager, livestock will remain an important part of climate positive farming, certainly from my perspective. Therefore, getting that message over to the public would be no bad thing at all, and change the dynamic really where farming is, as I say, has been held up as a major cause of greenhouse gas emissions, a major source of greenhouse gas emissions. We should be portraying ourselves more as part of the solution than the problem.
Absolutely. Thank you, Andrew. So questions from the chat. One is, so how did you create a culture of experience sharing? So just sharing experiences, sharing data between farmers. I don't know whether that needs to be directed to anyone of you in particular. Maybe Caroline can come in on this one as well.
I mean, it can be a challenging one. Farmers are very solitary by their nature, like many wild animals, and it can be very difficult to get them to cooperate. That's absolutely true, and that's not just in sharing, sharing machinery and costs and buildings. It's also can be in, what are you doing on your land, and how can we improve that? There can often be some implied criticism there. But I think that is certainly within the UK. I think that's a culture that is going to have to start to shift as we look towards the way that agriculture is going to be supported in the future. It has to involve a greater degree of collaborative thinking, I believe, and I think that that's something that's positive. We can achieve a lot more together. So it will be a challenge, I think, but I think it is the way that I think we should probably be embracing that challenge.
Becky, shall I quickly add to that as well? I mean, I think over the years we've found pretty well there's 4 ways of driving change. First is make sure the system works, and I think that's why, Regen, although it doesn't work perfectly, or integrated farming, it's a framing, and for that point of view, that's number 1. Number 2 is the show and tell. How does somebody else approach this? Would I do that? Do I disagree? Do I agree? Hadn't thought of that type of approach. The third is the market pull. The market pull is hugely powerful for driving change and is becoming increasingly so. And then the 4th way, if all else fails, legislate. And the challenge is often farmers will look to legislation to be the driver for their business. But the reality is, make sure your business is robust and use the framing of policy support in whatever format it comes to actually prop up your own priorities on farm. And that's something that's really critical, because legislation at the end of the day is there to prevent harm, and farmers don't go out of their way to harm things. The challenge comes when you've got external aspects that kind of create challenges. Thank you.
Thank you both. There's a question here which I think I'll ask to Joe and Ewan. Does regenerative agriculture focus on nutrient yield rather than crop yield?
I think that they're connected, so it's very difficult to separate them. There is lots of myth around a reduction in yield because we take a different approach to things. I think we need to measure, the margin is the bit that we need to measure and understand. The yield doesn't directly mirror what the margin is when we've finished in one cycle and start another. If that makes sense.
I don't think there's, I'd agree with you, and I don't think that there's a particular specific link to my mind between regenerative agriculture and nutrient density of the food. I don't think that that's perhaps not something that's been looked into that much, but also I don't believe that that's a driving principle, certainly not of this project. And again, I think I would agree with you, and I think as a farmer, I've always been deeply concerned that I'm not producing as much food as I can possibly produce off every acre of my land, because I believe that that's my job. I think my viewpoint has been shifting around that, and I guess, yes, we need to be producing as much sustainably produced food as we can produce. Now that hopefully means we will be producing food with, as Ewan said, a greater margin for the grower, because within the UK, where farmers only take home around 6 to 7% of the value of the food chain. That's clearly unsustainable. We can do as much as we like in an environmentally sustainable fashion, but if we go out of business doing it, that's no good. So hopefully regenerative agriculture, a reduction of inputs being one of the major aims in the medium term of regenerative agricultural systems, especially with inputs at the prices we currently see them, can only be a good thing and can hopefully only boost on-farm financial sustainability as well as environmental sustainability. I don't know if Andrew has anything further to add.
I think the question was crop yield versus nutrient yields, taking a slightly different tack in answering that. Yeah, as Joe says, the studies on nutrient density of food are kind of few and far between, particularly in relation to regenerative agriculture. They do exist in relation to organic products. But in terms of nutrient yield, maybe the question can be addressed from a kind of nutrient use efficiency perspective, in that with regenerative agriculture and more of kind of enhancing kind of natural system, we should be in a position where we are achieving a higher resource use efficiency and nutrient use efficiency. So rather than yield, I'll focus on nutrient efficiency. Back to Becky.
Thank you. Sorry, I was just reading comments. Just conscious of time now, and I know that we're due to finish in 3 minutes, and Celia would like to kind of wrap up. So I think that's everything for now, apart from a massive thank you to you for coming on today and presenting. Pass over to you, Celia.
Thank you, Becky. Thank you so much to all our speakers today. Indeed, I'm not going to hold everyone much longer, just say a few final words before sending you off on your way. I hope you are feeling energized and inspired by this event this afternoon. I certainly am. It's been really interesting to hear the discussions about motivations of farmers and the power of networks and of collaboration, etc. It's quite interesting that in the agriculture project, but when it was prepared already, that was 2 years ago, we identified this gap. We thought there's so many initiatives out there, there's lots of networks, lots of different organizations promoting sustainable agriculture under different names, etc. But they aren't really linking up. There is no platform at European level for this exchange and learning and collaboration. Let's try and fill that gap. And that's what we are trying to do with this community. It's been really interesting that in the lead up to today's event and just now, also I'm getting emails from people who are involved in networks and in projects promoting regenerative agriculture and are telling us, this is great, I would like to be part of your community. Let's link up, let's collaborate. I hope there are more people thinking this in our audience till now. And if you are thinking that, do get in touch. But we're not just going to wait to hear back from you. We are going to be in touch in the next few days with a proposal, a concrete proposal for the next steps. As we indicated, I believe in the Eventbrite page, the idea is to, in the first instance, have a mailing list where we can share information, organize events, etc. We are going to build on the mailing list of the project that we already have, but we will ask everyone to sign up, of course. We need to bear in mind GDPR. So we will send you a link to a form where you can sign up, when you can express your interests and be part of this journey. So keep an eye on your emails. In the next few days, it's coming your way, and be ready for a really exciting program of events next year. We've got a lot in stock in store for everyone to start learning about regenerative agriculture, about soils, and start sharing experience and knowledge online and hopefully offline if the situation allows. So thank you so much, everyone. And with this, we will call it a day.
Thank you, everybody.
Bye-bye, and thank you. Alistair. Nice meeting. Nice meeting.
Great. Thanks for staying. Yeah.
My pleasure.
Yeah.
Very interesting. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.